Very early on in Kengan Ashura, one of the most important conversations in the series takes place, though not a lot of attention typically gets given to it. It happens just after the fight with Rahito, when Oma, Yamashita, and Cade eat some dinner together to celebrate. While they're doing this, Cade asks Oma for his reasons for entering the Kengan Association, as opposed to trying to make his living in the public sphere. She assumes that he has some big, overarching reason to fight in such dangerous matches, but Oma brushes her off, saying that he only wishes to fight in them to prove that he's the strongest, and that any other reason would be ridiculous. When Cade responds by warning him he may lose his life, Oma in turn makes two more assertions that he doesn't have to worry about losing his life in these fights because he will never lose. So let's put down these assertions. 1. I am the strongest. 2. I don't fight for any other reason but to prove that I'm the strongest. 3. I won't die. And 4. I will never lose. These are the things that are core to Oma's self-conception. They are also all wrong. These are the four lies that Oma tells to himself. Certainly, he tells them confidently, and on some level, he might have even tricked himself into believing them. But when something happens that challenges them, he becomes very angry. When he's not chosen by Nogi to be his tournament representative, he attacks Nogi. When Sen stops him, he uses the advance in a fight with almost no stakes, except for the immense emotional stakes for Oma personally. Nogi was basically saying to him, Sen is stronger than you, and Nogi is of course correct at this point in time, but Oma can't stand the thought of being weaker than anyone else, or weakness in general. When Setsuna confronts him, Oma lashes out, going so far as to deride Nico as being weak and pathetic, when seconds earlier he was mentally asking Nico for help. He reiterates that he's doing nothing but seeking to be the strongest, but he can barely maintain this obvious lie for a few seconds until Setsuna leaves and he vows vengeance. Like his namesake, the Ashura, Ohma is mighty, but also like the Ashura, Ohma has not achieved enlightenment. He is blind to the truths about himself. Not totally blind, mind you. Ohma's subconscious doubts and repressed memories manifest as an image of Nico, who is far wiser than him. This Nico even calls himself Ohma's conscience. This part of Ohma is aware he's not the strongest, which is why he's far more critical of his own weakness in his adamantine and water kata, and is especially critical of when Ohma over-relies on his advance. He even warns Ohma that his reliance on the advance will eventually kill him, even though Ohma is verbally dismissive of the possibility of dying in battle. Ohma's faith in not dying starts to get shaken by his symptoms, but instead of heeding his doubts, he pushes onwards until he finally gets a message he can't ignore when he tries to pick a fight with the Fang. Kano Agito correctly pegs Ohma as a small fry in the grand scheme of things, and when Ohma doubles down, Agito crushes his delusion utterly. It's such an intense break with the past that Ohma's Nico actually manifests outside of his mind palace, not only challenging the assertion that Ohma is the strongest, but warning him that he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. He will either die from the strain of continuing or forfeit. Ohma's pillars are all under attack except one, the idea if he fights for any other reason but to prove he's the strongest, that it's just a lie. That is the pillar that Ohma must pull down himself. He still acts high and mighty, but that's the decision Ohma makes when he chooses not to fight for himself but for Yamashita. It's because of that when Ohma loses the battle of pure strength with Ryan, he has the will to look inside himself and start relying on what Nico taught him. He tearfully admits to his projection of Nico that all this time he was deeply affected by Nico's death and sought to avenge him. But this Nico encourages him to step forward. Fighting for strength wasn't wrong, but pretending that anything else was wrong was holding him back. Whereas before, the idea of fighting to prove his own strength was merely a facade Ohma was using to avoid facing the truth. After this point, he genuinely has that as his primary motive. And Ohma's gift for all of this is certainty. Not only might he die, but he is going to die. His body has become too damaged to survive much longer. He's thrown away his pride twice, and his reward is the ability to move on from the 4 lies to the 4 facts. He has begun the process of becoming more aware about himself. These are Ohma's 4 facts. 1. I can become stronger. 2. I am prepared to fight for other reasons. 3. I am going to die. And 4. I might lose. The ironic thing, of course, is that after Ohma abandoned the whining insistence that he was the strongest and had no equals, that's when he started making the biggest leaps in ability. Letting go of the need to claim that he was only ever fighting for pure strength let him fight purely for strength for the first time. As soon as he gets out of his coma, he has to fight an agent of Worm who uses the advance, but Ohma dispatches him effortlessly. It doesn't stop there. Despite his injuries, he handily outmatches the grappling prodigy Cosmo on the latter's own turf, even though Cosmo had reached a peak in his own prowess. He doesn't simply triumph over his nemesis Kiryu Setsuna, but by sparing him and abandoning his vengeance, he shows that he has acknowledged and triumphed over his own inner turmoil. And when he defeats the superhuman veteran Wakatsuki Takeshi in an astonishing comeback, he proves his ability for self-improvement in absolute terms. Instead of relying on the advance as a crutch as he did in his earlier fights, he bests all 3 without it. At this point, Ohma moves on from the 4 facts to the 4 truths. Number 1. I can become stronger, and I will become as strong as I can be. 2. I am prepared to fight for other reasons, and that doesn't make me weak. 3. I'm going to die, but I will make my death mean something. And 4. I might lose, but I will try my hardest with all of my conviction. Indeed, Ohma's changing relationship with the advance is the best display of his changed attitudes. Instead of a crutch that he needs to squeak by difficult competition, it becomes a trump card that puts the strongest fighter in the tournament closer to defeat than even the mighty Agito managed. Yes, it isn't enough to seal the deal, but by this point, winning the actual tournament has actually become rather academic. Ohma's goal has become internal instead of external, and as a result, he's been able to draw out his true inner strength.